The bridge of a starship is usually a place of routine. Screens glow softly, voices murmur, and beyond the wide viewing panes, the stars hang in silence. Commander Jake Morrison knew this rhythm well. His patrol ship had spent months sweeping through empty sectors of space, listening for signals that never came. For most of his crew, this was just another day. Systems checks, status reports, and quiet conversations over lukewarm coffee. But space has a way of hiding storms inside its silence. The alarm cut through the calm like a blade. A shrill, unignorable sound that made every crewmember snap upright. At the communications console, Lieutenant Amy Brooks stiffened. Her fingers froze mid-command. She pressed the receiver to her ear, brow furrowing as strange sounds poured through the static. At first, it was only distortion, a jumble of tones that carried no clear meaning. But then, beneath the noise, there were voices. Voices not born of Earth. Her expression shifted from curiosity, to alarm, to something that made the rest of the crew lean closer in silence. She tapped rapidly at her console, feeding the signal through the ship's translation software. The computer struggled. Fragments of words appeared on screen, broken, incomplete, and then suddenly clear. The message wasn't random. It was structured, deliberate. A distress call. Amy's lips trembled as she replayed the message, listening not just with her ears but with her heart. The alien voices were ragged with fear. Whoever they were terrified. Entire cities falling. Families devoured. A civilization facing extinction. Finally, the translation settled into coherence. The voices identified themselves as the Kithra Republic, a peaceful people 3 jumps from humanity's frontier. They had no military. No weapons. No defenses against what they called the Void Swarm. The Swarm wasn't an empire or an army. It was hunger given shape. Creatures vast and living, that consumed ships, stations, buildings, everything. They ate not only technology, but flesh. Entire worlds stripped to bone. Amy's hands shook as the recording played. Words like children, cities burning, and nothing left filled the bridge. The final portion was a plea. The Kithra admitted they had intercepted faint human radio signals years ago, proof, in their darkest hour, that they were not alone in the galaxy. They didn't know what humanity was. Friend or foe. Predator or protector. But desperation overruled fear. Their last words were simple. If anyone hears this, help us. Please. We are running out of time. The bridge fell silent. Commander Morrison clenched his fists. He thought of Earth. Of his own family. Of the unimaginable horror of watching everything you love devoured by something unstoppable. His voice, when he finally spoke, carried an edge of steel. We can't ignore this. And it turned out, they weren't the only ones listening. On the warship UES Vengeance, Captain Lisa Hayes had been halfway through dinner when her comms officer burst into the mess hall. The message played across her table, food forgotten, her eyes narrowing with every desperate alien word. By the time the transmission ended, her decision was already made. Farther away, aboard humanity's largest dreadnought, the UES Retribution, Admiral Peter Collins received the same call. A man hardened by decades of conflict, Collins had seen piracy, warlords, even insurgencies against Earth's colonies. But this was different. This wasn't a war. This was annihilation. And something inside him, deep and old, answered with a promise: humanity would not stand idle. Within hours, the Kithra's plea had spread across every human ship in the sector. Captains called each other, voices urgent, decisions swift. Should they wait for Earth's command? For committees and councils to deliberate? No. There was no time. The Kithra were dying now. And here is where the galaxy would learn something important about the species that lived on the death world called Earth. The Kithra had expected, if anyone answered at all, a single ship. Maybe a token gesture. They could never have imagined that their words had reached the most dangerous beings in known space. Humans. Born from a world where survival itself was a war, where every ecosystem was forged in predation and struggle. Earth had sculpted a people who endured the unendurable, who fought long after logic said surrender. They weren't just survivors. They were warriors. And when the innocent cried out, humanity's answer was rarely hesitation. Admiral Collins pressed the emergency command, and a message flashed across every human vessel, all ships. Immediate combat readiness. Rally at New Denver. Within minutes, warships began to converge. The gathering was unlike anything the frontier had seen. Battleships, mile-long engines of destruction, drifted into formation. Cruisers and destroyers bristling with weapons. Swarms of smaller support craft, medical ships, and carriers. Over 200 vessels, assembled not in years or months, but in a matter of hours. Other alien civilizations debated for decades before lifting a weapon. Humanity, by contrast, moved like a predator scenting blood. Captain Hayes, watching the fleet amass, felt pride surge within her. For once, humanity wasn't fighting for territory, resources, or politics. They were fighting for something purer, to protect strangers who had no means of protection. When Admiral Collins addressed the captains by secure channel, his words were clear. The enemy adapts. The enemy consumes. We will not parley. We will not hesitate. We fight until the swarm is ash and the Kithra are safe. That is the mission. That is humanity. The faces on screen were grim, resolute. And so the fleet prepared to depart. Crews loaded weapons, ran final checks, and whispered prayers. Not for themselves, but for the alien families huddled in shelters, hoping against hope that someone, anyone, might save them. The Kithra had asked for help. What they received was a storm. A storm from Earth. A storm that the galaxy would never forget. If you were one of those captains, if you heard the cry of the Kithra, would you risk everything for strangers you had never met? Or would you wait, play it safe, and let the swarm take them? Tell me in the comments, I want to hear your perspective. The human fleet surged through hyperspace like a spear thrust into the dark. When the transition ended, the stars of the Kithra Republic spread across the void. But beauty was not what greeted them. Even the most battle-hardened officers fell silent. The system was dying. Before them drifted nightmares. Creatures vast as moons, grotesque amalgams of bone and muscle, gnawing through everything in reach. Their hulls writhed with teeth, tentacles, and hunger. They were not ships, not machines. They were alive, living armadas bred for one purpose, consumption. Commander Jake Morrison's stomach twisted as his sensors captured the sight of a crystalline Kithra station, delicate, elegant, glittering in starlight, crushed like glass in the jaws of one of these horrors. Alien refugees scattered in tiny vessels, fragile as insects. Few escaped. Most were devoured. Below, on the surface of Kithra Prime, entire cities burned. Smoke plumed into the sky as ground-based swarms consumed streets, towers, families. The translation from Amy Brooks still echoed in Jake's mind. Children screaming. Cities falling. And here it was, no longer words, but reality. Jake's voice hardened. Bring us into formation. Weapons hot. Across the fleet, emotions rippled. Captain Ryan Murphy aboard the UES Thunder slammed a fist into his console as he spotted a small shuttle of Kithra children fleeing through an asteroid belt. A medium-sized swarm creature pursued, relentless. The predator's movements were fluid, disturbingly intelligent, hurting its prey. Ryan's jaw clenched. If humanity had arrived moments later, those children would already be gone. Admiral Collins's voice broke across every channel. Calm. Cold. Deadly. Listen well. You are looking at evil given form. These things will not stop. They will not spare. And so neither will we. Humans do not abandon the innocent. We end this. The order spread through the fleet like fire through dry grass. The humans moved like wolves. The colossal battleships took the central positions, their weapons primed to annihilate the largest swarm beasts. Cruisers and destroyers fanned outward, interceptors and bombers buzzing forward like angry metal hornets. Then, the void lit with fury. Nuclear warheads lanced into the black, trailing brilliance before detonating in supernova flashes. Plasma cannons vomited white fire, tearing through chitin and bone. Kinetic slugs, simple rods of metal propelled at fractions of light speed, struck like divine hammers, shattering monsters into drifting gore. For the first time in their existence, the Void Swarm encountered a predator fiercer than themselves. Jake Morrison's ship spat fury at the swarm. He watched a massive creature rupture, torn apart by a tungsten impact that flared bright enough to be mistaken for the birth of a star. His crew cheered, but Jake's heart remained heavy. For every monster slain, dozens more pressed forward. The swarm wasn't just feeding. It was learning. Captain Lisa Hayes watched in horror as the next wave of creatures thickened their hides, sprouting armored plates where plasma fire had just scorched them. Others grew translucent shielding that absorbed kinetic strikes. With each exchange, the swarm evolved. "They're adapting," she whispered. Dr. Helen Carter, monitoring the battle from her science deck, confirmed it. "They're not natural. They're engineered. Weapons. Living weapons designed to consume civilizations." The realization chilled the fleet. Someone, somewhere, had built these horrors. But humans were not strangers to impossible odds. If the swarm adapted, so would they. The battle raged. Hours stretched into a blur of fire and blood. Ryan Murphy's ship staggered as acidic projectiles dissolved chunks of its armor. Tentacles wrapped around the Thunder, dragging it toward gnashing teeth. Ryan shouted for point-blank fire. His crew unleashed everything: cannons, torpedoes, even small arms fire from open hatches. The monster convulsed, tearing itself apart under the storm. The Thunder emerged battered, scarred, but alive. Still, for every victory, losses mounted. Ships burned. Human lives winked out. And yet, unlike other species, humans did not falter. Every time the swarm adapted, humans answered with rage, ingenuity, and willpower that no biology could predict. Where others would retreat, humanity fought harder. Then came Admiral Collins's boldest order yet. "We're going inside them." The bridge crews froze. To fight inside the swarm? Madness. But humanity had always thrived in madness. Sergeant Dan Rodriguez, leader of the Marine boarding squads, checked his powered armor. The suits were masterpieces of Earth's lethal ingenuity: thick plating, sealed oxygen, integrated weapons. Designed for survival in hell itself. And now, they would test that design in the belly of the beast. Captain Hayes volunteered the Vengeance for the first run. She ordered her ship to accelerate straight into a medium-class swarm creature. Tentacles latched on. Jaws unhinged, rows of teeth yawning wide enough to swallow skyscrapers. The Vengeance plunged into darkness. Inside, Rodriguez and his Marines breached the airlocks. Flesh walls pulsed around them, dripping acid, stinking of decay. Smaller parasite creatures swarmed like immune cells, clawing and biting at the invaders. Marines cut through with plasma torches, detonated shaped charges, and pressed deeper. What they found confirmed humanity's suspicions. A nervous system. A brain. Vulnerable. Rodriguez planted explosives. Weapons thundered. The brain ruptured, electricity sparking through the fleshy corridors. The creature spasmed violently. Outside, the swarm beast went rigid, and died. The Vengeance roared free of its dissolving carcass, battered but triumphant. Cheers erupted across the fleet. Humanity had found a way to kill the unkillable. What followed was brutal ingenuity. Ship after ship rammed swarm monsters, disgorging marines into pulsing, living mazes of flesh and bone. Men and women fought through stomach acid, living traps, parasite claws. Many never returned. But enough did, and each time, another beast died screaming. The Kithra, huddled in shelters on their burning world, could only watch in stunned awe. Through their telescopes, they saw strangers from another star not retreating, not bargaining, but plunging willingly into death itself to save them. No species in the galaxy had ever seen anything like it. And still, humanity was not done. Dr. Helen Carter, working side by side with Kithra scientists, devised a weapon not of steel, but biology. A virus designed to attack the swarm's one true advantage, their ability to adapt. Once infected, swarm creatures would lose their evolutionary edge. Armor would stop thickening. Shields would stop forming. They would remain vulnerable, locked in their current state, unable to learn, unable to grow. It was humanity weaponizing evolution itself. The final test came soon after. A moon-sized swarm entity loomed in orbit above Kithra Prime. This was no ordinary beast. It pulsed with control signals, directing the swarm like a general commands an army. Destroy this creature, and the swarm would collapse into chaos. Commander Jake Morrison led the fighter squadron tasked with delivery. Virus warheads armed, engines screaming, they darted through clouds of parasites and acidic storms. Fighters burned around him, swallowed whole. Yet Jake pressed on, weaving his craft through impossible trajectories until lock confirmed. Missiles streaked. Impacts bloomed. The command creature howled, its colossal body shuddering. And that was the moment humanity knew, the swarm could be broken. What do you think about Admiral Collins's decision to send humans inside the swarm? Was it brilliance, or insanity? Would you have volunteered for such a mission? Share your thoughts in the comments, I'd love to see where you stand. The swarm command creature convulsed in orbit above Kithra Prime. Its body, large enough to eclipse continents, writhed as the viral payload spread through its nervous system. For the first time, the swarm faltered. Ships that had once fought with perfect coordination now moved clumsily, striking at random. Ground swarms broke into disarray, collapsing against fortified shelters. The sky itself seemed to shiver as the monster's scream echoed across every channel, not in sound, but in psychic pressure. Then, silence. The command creature ruptured, bursting into a drifting graveyard of flesh and bone. And just like that, the battle turned. Admiral Collins stood on his command deck, face carved from stone, as reports flooded in. Targets disorganized. Ground swarms retreating. Enemy coordination lost. They're falling apart. For hours, humanity pressed the advantage. Battleships carved through leaderless remnants, fighters hunted stragglers, marines swept the planet clean of scattered predators. For the first time since the war began, victory seemed not just possible, but real. Yet Collins's gaze remained fixed on the void. Remember this, he said softly. It only takes one spark for the swarm to return. We've bought survival, not safety. The words settled like a shadow over the fleet. Down on Kithra Prime, the survivors emerged from their shelters. The Kithra were a people of crystalline skin and fragile frames, scholars and artisans more than warriors. They had never understood humanity, not their stubbornness, not their refusal to accept inevitability. To the Kithra, war was a storm, something endured until it passed. But now, standing on the ruins of their cities, they saw humans as something else entirely. Rescuers. Monsters. Or perhaps, both. Captain Ryan Murphy descended with the first relief teams. He carried no weapon, only crates of medical supplies. When a Kithra child approached him, wide-eyed and trembling, Ryan knelt and extended a ration pack. The child hesitated, then accepted. Behind her, thousands watched. That was the moment the Kithra truly understood, humanity did not come for conquest. They came to save. In the days that followed, human engineers worked alongside alien survivors to rebuild shelters and secure water systems. Doctors treated crystalline physiology as best they could, adapting tools not meant for such fragile frames. Marines, once soaked in blood, now carried children on their shoulders. And through it all, the galaxy watched. No war was ever hidden. Refugees carried tales. Traitors spread rumors. Long-range sensors recorded flashes of impossible battles. The story traveled faster than any fleet. The humans fought the swarm, and won. For 500,000 years, species had lived in terror of the void. Worlds were abandoned. Empires turned to dust. No one resisted. No one could. But humans did. In the council chambers of distant empires, the whispers began. If they can kill the swarm, what else can they kill? Are they saviors, or a new threat? The irony was not lost on humanity. For ages, Earth had been mocked as a forgotten world, too fractured, too late to the galactic stage. Now, those same voices trembled at their name. On the bridge of the UES Horizon, Commander Jake Morrison stood with Dr. Helen Carter. They stared out at the stars, where the last embers of the battle still drifted. "They'll fear us," Jake said quietly. Helen shook her head. "They'll need us." Fear and need are not the same, but they can live side by side. Jake exhaled. "You think we've started something bigger, don't you?" Her eyes stayed fixed on the stars. "No one creates life forms like the swarm by accident. Someone built them. Someone unleashed them. The real war hasn't even begun." Silence stretched between them. The thought was heavier than victory. Admiral Collins's address to the fleet came soon after. "Men and women of Earth, today you fought not only for a foreign people, but for the idea that terror itself can be defied. For generations, the galaxy has lived in submission to fear. But humanity does not submit. Not to empires. Not to monsters. Not to inevitability. Remember this day. Not as the day we saved the Kithra. But as the day we proved that fear itself can bleed." The Kithra Council, what remained of it, declared humanity their eternal allies. It was less a treaty and more a vow, carved into stone, sung into crystalline resonators, written in the heart of every survivor. For the first time in galactic memory, a species stood up not as supplicant, but as partner. Humanity had not only fought. They had earned trust. But aboard the Horizon, Admiral Collins met privately with his captains. His words were stripped of triumph. "The swarm is not the end. It is a tool. A weapon. Which means a wielder exists. Whoever they are, they watched this battle. And now, they know us." The room was silent. Even the most battle-hardened captains shifted uneasily. Collins's eyes swept them. "We cannot go home. Earth will not be safe. We stand at the threshold of something far larger than ourselves. And when the next shadow falls, the galaxy will look to us. Whether they call us saviors, or devils, or both." That night, Jake Morrison recorded a message to Earth. His voice was tired, weighted with both pride and warning. "Mom, Dad, if you're hearing this, know that we're alive. More than alive, we did what no one thought possible. But the truth is, it's only the beginning. Out here, we're surrounded by enemies, by monsters, by mysteries older than our world. And yet, I've never been more certain of what it means to be human. It means fighting when no one else will. It means standing where others break. It means saving those who never believed we could." The galaxy laughed at us. Until they saw what we were preparing for. He paused, then added, softer. "And I think they'll never laugh again." In the silence of space, the human fleet turned toward the stars. Battered, bloodied, but unbroken. Behind them, the Kithra wept in gratitude. Ahead of them, the unknown waited. For humanity, this was not the end. It was the first step into a war far greater than any they had imagined. And the galaxy would never forget the day Earth rose from the shadows and taught the stars what it meant to be human. If humanity really encountered a weaponized swarm like this, do you think we'd stand and fight, or turn and run like every other species? Would unity or division define us? Let me know your thoughts. I read every comment.